Welcome back to Torah Today Ministries and our continuing series Tehillim Talks, Studies in the Psalms. And in this episode, we'll be looking into the short 9-verse psalm, Psalm 52. And this psalm is about one of the most wicked villains in the scriptures. He only appears for a short time in 1 Samuel, but he is indeed a villain, a wicked, wicked man. And his name is Doeg. D-O-E-G. And the attribution for the psalm reads like this: to the choir master, and that word for choir master is one we've seen many times in the Psalms and we'll see many times again. It's the word lamnatzeach, to the natzeach, the choir master. We're going to look at that word netzach, the root of this word, a little bit later, so just keep that in mind. It's a maskil of David. A maskil is a teaching psalm, so there's instruction here for us. This is not so much a psalm of praise or a psalm of petition, but it's there to teach. A maskil of David when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul, David has come to the house of Ahimelech. Now you'll find this story in 1 Samuel chapters 21 and 22. And if you're not familiar at all with the story, I suggest you pause the teaching here, go back, read those two chapters, 1 Samuel 21 and 22, and then come back and pick it up here. But if that's inconvenient, you're driving or whatever, you may remember this story. So in a nutshell, it's this. David is on the lam. He's running from King Saul, who's trying to kill him. And David and his band of followers are hungry. They're starving. So David goes to the tabernacle. And he speaks to the priest, Ahimelech, and says, "Do you have anything here to eat?" And Ahimelech said, "We don't have anything here except for the 12 loaves of the showbread, which are in the holy place, and it's unlawful for us to give that to people who are not priests." And David says, "Well, we're starving." So Ahimelech, he puts human need above the religious instructions and commandments. And so he gives these 12 loaves to David and his men. He also gives David Goliath's sword because David does not even have a weapon. Yeshua refers to this incident over in Matthew chapter 12, I believe. And anyways, in a nutshell, that's what it is. Now, Doeg, who is one of the servants of King Saul, tells Saul about this. And so Saul has his men go and kill Ahimelech and all the priests. He has them slaughtered because his jealousy of David was so intense that it filled him with rage that the high priest would help David. And so he has him murdered and all the other priests. A very, very sad plot. And all because Doeg opened his mouth. Now, what's interesting is that the Jewish commentators compared Doeg with David, because they say there are a number of similarities here that Doeg could have been a David. He could have had the qualities of David, but he harnessed his qualities and his abilities instead to do great damage to the Jewish people and to his own soul. A couple interesting things about Doeg and David are this. If you look here at the screen, you'll notice that Doeg is spelled Dalet Aleph Gimel. David is spelled Dalet Vav Dalet. And they both have the exact same numerical value. They both equal 14. What's also interesting is that when we're introduced to Doeg, and that is in 1 Samuel 21:7, it says, "Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before Adonai. His name was Doeg the Edomite." He was an Edomite, and in Hebrew, the word Edomite is Admoni, from the word Adom, which means red. Edom means red, because Esau, the father of the Edomites, we recall, was reddish. So he is called Admoni. Now David, over in 1 Samuel 16:12, this is when Samuel went to the house of Jesse to choose one of his sons to be the next king. And he didn't find any of the sons of Jesse to be the one God had chosen for king. He says, "You sure you don't have another son around here somewhere?" And Jesse said, well, there's David. He's out in the field tending the sheep. So they bring in the youngest son, David. And it says, and he sent and brought David. Now he was ruddy. He was reddish. And that word is admoni. So you can hear the words are almost identical because David was reddish. So you have Doeg, the, how was that pronounced again? He is the Adumi, and David is the Admoni. You can hear the word Edom in there in both because they were reddish, they were ruddy. David was ruddy in complexion. So we see these similarities here. And yet in their behaviors and in their character, they could not have been more different. Now, let's get right into the psalm. Verses 1 through 3, David writes, why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? I put O mighty man in quotes because in the Hebrew it's the word gibor. And the Hebrew would suggest that David is using this in a mocking kind of way. Like, oh, you're such a mighty man. You're a servant of Saul, and yet look what you did. You think you're a mighty man, but you are really a nothing because you've misused your skills and talents. Isaiah uses gibor in the same way over in Isaiah 22, 17 to 18. Here he's prophesying over one of King Hezekiah's traitorous servants, court officials named Shebna. And this is what Isaiah says. Behold, Adonai will hurl you away violently, O you Gibor, O you strong man. He will seize firm hold on you and whirl you around and throw you like a ball into a wide land, into an empty land. There you shall die, and there shall be your glorious chariots, you shame of your master's house. So we see Isaiah also uses Gibor in a mocking way. And it's what the Hebrew tends to suggest here concerning Doeg. But then the next phrase doesn't seem to have anything to do with the first phrase. The loving kindness of God endures all the day. So what does that have to do with why do you boast of evil, O mighty man, O Gibor? It's because Doeg's actions that were done in his ego and in his pride actually brought destruction to himself. It destroyed his reputation for all of time, because when we think of the name Doeg, we don't think of a hero, we think of a villain. But the loving kindness of God, the chesed of God, endures all the day. It's as if David is saying, you acted like a bully against someone who is weaker than you. And because of that, you will crumble into nothing. But the loving kindness of God endures all the day, endures forever. If you could act it in kindness, in chesed, your actions would endure forever, your reputation would endure forever. But instead, you acted like a bully, and everything crumbles to dust. Verse 2, your tongue plots destruction. I put destruction in red because we'll see the same word a little bit later on, and I'll comment on it there. Your tongue plots destruction like a sharp razor doing deceit. Now, if you think about a sharp razor, if a razor is truly sharp as it can be, when it cuts you, it's pretty much painless. And I know there have been times maybe you've had this experience where you cut yourself on something sharp and don't even realize it until later you realize, I've got blood on my fingers. What happened? And you realize you cut yourself somewhere. And this is the way a sharp tongue works. This is the way a lying tongue works. A lying tongue can work in someone's life, and you can hear someone speaking lies. It doesn't even elicit any pain. But later you notice you're losing life because of this cut, because of this sharp tongue. Verse 3, you love evil more than good. A lie more than speaking what is tzedek, what is righteous. And then there's a selah there. It's as if David wants us to pause and ponder what has just been said. Why is it some people love evil more than good? I think there are probably many reasons, but one of the reasons is because evil is easy and it's quick and it gets immediate results, whereas good can be difficult and often the gratification for doing what is good has delayed reward. And people can climb quickly by destroying those around them. Whereas by building up those around you, you may not notice yourself climbing at all. But if we humble ourselves in the eyes of the Lord, He'll lift us up in due time. But sometimes people resort to evil, to wickedness, because it's faster to climb over the corpses of the people whose characters we've destroyed with our lying tongues. And then we come to verses 4 and 5. And by the way, one of the interesting things, Rashi comments and says that there's a reference to Doeg in another place in Samuel. In 1 Samuel 16, 17, and 18. This is when King Saul was looking for someone to play music for him. And Rashi suggests that it was Doeg who steps forward. This is what it says, just 2 verses. 1 Samuel 16, 17 and 18. So Saul said to his servants, "Provide for me a man who can play well and bring him to me." One of the young men, and again, Rashi says that young man was Doeg. We don't know this, but this is Jewish tradition. But let's pretend it was Doeg. So Doeg steps forward and answered, "Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite who is skillful in playing." Now that's all he needed to say. It's all he needed to say. But Doeg had to say more. "A man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, a man of good presence, and Adonai is with him." You see what Doeg has just done? All King Saul asked for was someone who could play the harp for him. But Doeg says, "I know such a person, but he also has all these qualities, King Saul, that you don't have." And so already he's stirring up jealousy. He's laying the groundwork for deceit and evil in the future. Now again, we don't know if this is actually Doeg, but it's interesting to think about because it very well could have been. And again, Rashi suggests that that is Doeg who spoke those words. Now, in verse 4 and 5, we read, "You love all words that swallow up." Most translations say devour. Well, devouring kind of implies some chewing, but this is just swallowing it up like a snake. A snake does not chew his food. A snake bites. It imparts poison and paralyzes, and then it swallows the animal whole. This is the practice of a serpent. And there are some other references to this kind of serpent behavior that I'd like to read for you. In Proverbs chapter 1, verses 10 through 12. A father is speaking to a son. It says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us bala,'" it's the same word here. "Let us just, like Sheol, like the grave, let us just swallow them up, swallow them alive, and whole, like these who go down to the pit." And in Psalm 5:9, we read, "For there is no truth in their mouth. Their inmost self is destruction. Their throat is an open grave. They flatter with their tongue." Their throat's an open grave. Picture yourself walking at night and you're making your way through a graveyard and there's a grave that's open and plop, there you go right down in. You don't go down a bit at a time. You fall in all at once. And so you see these images of the grave and of someone's lying tongue just swallowing someone whole. I have found in my experience when people lie and damage the character of another, they don't damage just a little bit of that person. They don't damage just one detail, one facet of that person. When they lie, it tends to damage the entire person, the entire character, to where people who listen and absorb these lies can see no good in that person after that point. We need to be very careful of this serpent behavior, because our enemy is a serpent. His only weapon is his mouth and the poison of his lies. And then if he can get us, he'll swallow us whole. So, let's be careful of the person with a deceitful tongue. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. Now, it's talking about this is what God will do to the liar, but God will break you down forever. He will snatch you and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. So you may think you're getting away with something. You may think that you've gotten away with your lying and you're going to elevate yourself by tearing down another person. But God is actually going to bring destruction to you. And this is where we find that word netzach again. It's right here. Nun zari chet, netzach. And most translations just translate this for eternity or forever. But there are a number of words that are too easily just translated forever. And we need to understand that if the scriptures use a particular Hebrew word in a particular place, it has a particular meaning to it. We can't just translate similar Hebrew words all the same. Hebrew has very few synonyms, and we need to treat each of these apparent synonyms with their own character. Netzach is one of these. So again, this is the word when you see a psalm that says, for the conductor, la manatzeach, for the one who is going to direct the choir and direct the music. It also comes from this word. Does that mean the conductor is forever? That the song goes on forever? Though I've heard some songs I thought would never end. What it means is perpetuity. The conductor chooses the music. And he'll take a song we sang a few weeks ago, let's sing it again. Let's keep it perpetuating. And then a few weeks later, sing it again. And when he's conducting, he may have you repeat. So he maintains, perpetuates the melody. It doesn't mean that song is just sung for eternity, and that conductor is conductor for eternity. But he practices perpetuating a melody and keeping it in people's hearts and minds so they can remember the music and the words. And so when we think of Doeg, what do we always think of when we think of this villain? We think of the horrible lie he told, or I should say the half-truth, and a half-truth is a whole lie. And when he spoke to Saul and told him that David went to the priest, and the priest gave him bread, and made it look like the priest is Saul's enemy. David himself was not even Saul's enemy. But he spoke in a way that brought death. And so when we think of Doeg for perpetuity, we'll always think of him as a villain. Even though by now I think he's repented, and maybe even in his own life he repented, we don't know. But the action that follows him in perpetuity is what he did, what he said, that led to the death of the priests there in the days of King Saul. Verses 6 and 7. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him. Now, this word laugh, we tend to think of laugh as when you're just kind of throwing your head back and just roaring with laughter and slapping your thigh and wiping tears in total hilarity. And, the word zachak is the word we translate laugh. And but there are a couple variations of that. And one of those variations, in fact, you find it twice over in the passage in Judges 16:25. And when their hearts were merry, they said, call Samson that he may shachak, entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he zakak, he entertained them. He he was blind, and they brought him out to make a fool of him. Turned out pulling the whole house down on their heads. So there's shachak, zakak, and there are flavors of meaning. And this word, even in English, the word to laugh can mean a lot of different things. Losing control, just laughing till tears are squirting, or just kind of, just kind of a chuckle. It can be a little tee-hee from a girl. It can be just kind of a smile and making a sound. It can be a whole, I'm really kind of at sea here, but it can be a whole spectrum of expression. So I want us to look at this. And in Psalm 2, where it talks about how God laughs at those who are his enemies. I don't see him just leaning back on his throne, laughing uproariously at his enemies. But it can mean that he's there's a deep satisfaction in seeing justice done. Think of it this way. Maybe in your town you have a mayor who's totally corrupt, or you have a senator or whatever kind of a leader you have who's totally corrupt and seems to keep getting away with crimes in office. And finally the day comes that he's caught, he's taken into court, and the judge pronounces a sentence on him. Do you just laugh out loud? Probably not. But you have to confess, a bit of joy that will express itself, not because of the downfall of another person, but because justice wins out. And there's a deep satisfaction that comes when we know that life rhymes, life makes sense, and the evil are finally brought to task, and those who are innocent are proclaimed innocent, and they're justified. So I think that is what is going on here with this word that is used for laugh. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him. Now, if you're fearful, you're probably not laughing. I guess there is nervous laughter, but here we're realizing God has the final say. So there's an awe and a respect and a fear of God. But there's also a deep satisfaction in knowing that the villain, the unjust, the wicked are brought to justice. And this is what they say: behold the man who did not make God his strength. He trusts in the abundance of his riches. So let him seek refuge in his own destruction. Now there's that same word we saw before. Now back up in verse 2. Your tongue, Doeg, plots destruction. So with his tongue he plotted the destruction of others. But now we see the poetic justice. And it says, let him seek refuge in his own destruction. He wanted refuge, and he wanted to be put on a pedestal for causing the destruction of others. They're saying, now let him find satisfaction in his own destruction. And there's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes when you see right proven right and wickedness proven wicked. When I was reading this and contemplating it, I was reminded of a whole list of passages in Proverbs. Let me read just 3 of them to you. Proverbs 10:31. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut off. Proverbs 12:19. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Proverbs 18:21, the most well-known. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. The wise man realizes that we are going to pay consequences for the misuse of the tongue. And of the person like Doeg, who could foresee the destruction he would cause to himself by misusing his tongue, would he have still misused it? Probably not. But this is the difference between a David and a Doeg, between a wise man and a fool. A wise man sees consequences. And a fool either doesn't see them, or he simply doesn't believe in them, or he's just so desperate that he ignores the consequences and goes ahead with his evil plot. Now I have a red line over here on the left because you're going to see this passage here, the second part of verse 7, translated in all kinds of ways. This is what I've settled on as being the best, but I could be wrong. So just look at a bunch of different translations and see how they all are kind of scrambling to make sense of the last half of verse 7. And then we come to the end of the psalm. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. Now think about this earlier when it talks about the lying tongue cutting down and the person who lies being cut down. But David says, I'm like a green olive tree in the house of God. Green olive tree means there's so much potential. There's so much promise. There's so much hope for tomorrow. Now, you don't plant olive trees in the house of God. In fact, there are rules against planting trees in the temple or in the temple area. So what is the house of God that David's referring to? He's referring to the spiritual house. And I'm like a green olive tree in the house of God. The olive tree is a picture of shalom, of peace, of fruitfulness, and of a bright future. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. What does it mean to wait for God's name? Kind of a cryptic statement. But remember that in Scripture, a name is equivalent to a person's character. And David's saying, Lord, though I don't see you operating and taking action right now, I'll wait for your name. I'll wait for you to step up and prove the character and the truth of your name. In other words, that you will do what you said, that you'll be true to your character, that the wicked will be destroyed, the wicked will be dealt with, and the righteous will be defended and elevated. I don't see it happening yet, but I'll wait for your name. I'll wait for your character to manifest itself and the truth of who you are to be put on full display. So anyways, I hope that this short psalm has been a blessing to you. There's a lot packed into these 9 verses. And again, if you're unfamiliar with the background story, go back and read 1 Samuel chapters 21 and 22. And remember, be a David, not a Doeg. So until next time, I wish you shalom and may God bless.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.
That's a wrap.